In the soft glow of memory, there lies a chapter of history when the world seemed to pause, when the hum of cities slowed, and when countless lives were reshaped by hardship. It was the time of the Great Depression, a season of emptiness in many homes, yet also a season of wandering, of searching, of learning how to live with little more than hope in one's pocket. And among those who walked the roads and rode the rails were the ones known as hobos. Tonight, we tell their story not as a tale of loss, but as a quiet lullaby of endurance, of the simple art of surviving without a single dollar, of finding dignity and connection in a world where money was scarce, but the human spirit was abundant. Imagine a long stretch of countryside under the fading light of dusk. The horizon is painted in soft oranges and deep purples, and the last whistle of a freight train echoes across the open fields. Alongside the tracks walks a figure in a worn jacket, a small bundle tied to a stick slung over his shoulder. His footsteps are steady, unhurried, as though the road itself is his companion. This traveller, nameless to most and yet familiar in spirit, is a hobo. He does not wander in despair, but with a quiet rhythm, as though each mile walked is another stanza in a song of survival. Without coins to jingle in his pocket, he moves with trust in the journey, in the kindness of strangers, in the lessons whispered by the road. The trains were their lifelines, their carriages of hope. By day, the iron giants stretched across the land, linking towns and villages, rolling with the thunder of wheels on tracks. By night, when the world grew hushed, they became moving shelters, carrying wanderers from one place to another. Picture a man seated in the shadowed corner of a boxcar, the wooden floor beneath him rough but steady, the cool night air drifting in through the open door. Beyond, fields pass like gentle waves, the moon glimmers on rivers and rooftops, and for a time, the hobo feels both nowhere and everywhere at once. The sway of the train, the hum of steel, the whisper of wind, it all becomes a lullaby, carrying him forward, not just across the land, but deeper into the shared story of thousands like him. With no dollar to spend, hobos turned instead to their senses, to their skills, and most of all to one another. They became mapmakers of kindness, leaving behind small chalk marks on gates and fences, symbols simple yet full of meaning. A triangle might tell of work to be had, a circle might signal that food could be found, and a cross might warn of unkindness. These symbols were not written in books, nor printed in newspapers, but passed quietly from hand to hand, from one wanderer to the next. Like stars charting the night sky, these marks formed a constellation of survival, each one a beacon guiding strangers to safety, to warmth, to sustenance. And in this secret language, hobos found connection, a way to turn a vast and uncertain land into a network of quiet care. Food, though scarce, was never entirely absent. A knock on the back door of a farmhouse might yield a slice of bread, or perhaps a bowl of stew in exchange for splitting wood or sweeping a porch. Some hobos learned to fish in rivers that meandered past the tracks. Others gathered wild berries or gleaned vegetables left behind after harvest. Around campfires, they would share what little they had, stretching small meals into feasts of companionship. Picture a circle of travelers in the twilight, flames flickering on their faces. A tin pot balanced over the fire, the smell of coffee mixing with the scent of smoke and earth. Their voices rise and fall in soft conversation, stories exchanged as though they were currency richer than gold. In those moments, the hunger of the body was softened by the fullness of human connection. The camps they built, known gently as hobo jungles, were not grand or permanent, but they carried the feeling of home, made of branches, canvas, and scraps gathered along the way. These camps stood at the edges of towns, hidden yet alive with warmth. Within them, there was order, quiet respect, and a sense of belonging. A man might play a harmonica, its notes drifting out into the night air, while another brewed coffee or stirred a pot of beans. Laughter would rise, then fade into thoughtful silence as the stars above glittered like promises. Though each traveller might leave by morning, in that night they belonged to something greater than themselves. The jungle was not simply a camp, it was proof that even in the leanest times, community could be built from nothing. The life of a hobo was not defined by what he lacked, but by how he adapted. With no coin to purchase a ticket, he learned to listen to the schedules of trains, to watch the shifting signals, to know when to slip aboard and when to rest. With no wallet to fill, he carried instead a bundle of essentials, perhaps a spare shirt, a blanket, a small knife, and above all, resilience. And though the road was long and the nights sometimes cold, there was beauty to be found in the simple things, the scent of rain-soaked earth, the call of a distant owl, the sight of the dawn spreading pink and gold across the sky after a night under the stars. To live with nothing. The hobos discovered was to live with everything the world freely offered, if only one had the eyes to see it. As the Great Depression pressed heavily on the nation, hobos carried with them not despair, but stories. Songs sung softly by the fire. Tales of towns far away, memories of home left behind. They became, in a way, the storytellers of the road, keeping alive the threads of hope and humour that bound people together. For though their lives were hard, they understood something timeless. That wealth is not only counted in dollars, but in kindness given and received, in the sharing of burdens, in the comfort of companionship under the endless sky. When night settled across the land and the towns grew quiet, the hobos often found themselves resting beneath the wide dome of stars. The earth itself became their bed, the grass their pillow, and the song of crickets their lullaby. Some would sleep by rivers, lulled by the steady trickle of water against stones, while others lay close to the tracks, soothed by the distant rhythm of trains rolling through the dark. It was not luxury, nor was it comfort in the way we might imagine today, but in those moments the world itself seemed to fold gently around them. The night sky offered peace, and for a few hours the burdens of hunger and uncertainty gave way to the calm of rest. In sleep, their minds could wander to memories of family, to hopes for tomorrow, or to dreams that stretched beyond the horizon. With no roof to call their own, the hobos often relied on the kindness of strangers. In those years, households too were struggling, yet many still offered what they could. A farmer might share a loaf of bread in exchange for work in the field. A homemaker might offer soup to a traveller who promised to chop wood or mend a fence. The exchanges were simple, yet deeply human. They showed that even in times of great scarcity, generosity could bloom like a flower pushing through cracked pavement. For the hobo, each act of kindness was not merely a meal or a place to rest, but a reminder that compassion still lived in the world. And for those who gave, perhaps the gift of helping another eased the weight of their own worries. The hobos developed not only their own codes of symbols, but also a set of unspoken rules that guided their wandering lives. Among these was respect for property, for families, for the hospitality they might receive. A hobo who broke trust could bring hardship upon others, for towns would grow less welcoming if their kindness was misused. So they taught one another the quiet discipline of gratitude, of earning what was given, of leaving a place better than they found it. These lessons, passed from one traveller to the next, created a shared understanding, a kind of invisible law that helped preserve the delicate balance between those who had little and those who had even less. Often, the days of a hobo were filled with long stretches of walking, the road stretching endlessly under the sun, along highways and dusty back roads. They carried themselves with patience, step after step, mile after mile. Their shadows lengthened and shortened with the hours. Their feet grew weary, but still they pressed on. To pass the time, some sang softly to themselves, old folk songs that carried them forward, or hymns remembered from childhood. Others told stories aloud to no one in particular, speaking into the open air as though the earth itself were listening. The road was not silent, it was alive with memory, with echoes of all who had walked before. And as the hobos moved through it, they became part of that living current, another voice added to the great chorus of history. In the evenings, when they gathered in small groups, the conversations often turned to dreams. One man might speak of returning to his hometown when work could be found again. Another of sending money to his family someday. Another of simply seeing the country from coast to coast before settling down. These conversations, carried on in the glow of campfires, were like sparks of light in the dark, reminders that even in the hardest times, people carried visions of the future within them. The dreams were not always grand. Sometimes they were as simple as the wish for a warm bed, a full meal, or the smile of a loved one. Yet they were powerful enough to keep men and women walking, climbing into trains, and facing the unknown day after day. The hobo's bundle, often no more than a handkerchief tied to a stick, carried only the barest essentials, a comb perhaps, or a spare shirt, maybe a pocket knife or a keepsake from home. Some carried photographs, worn and faded, that they would look at in the quiet of the evening. Others carried small tools that allowed them to work odd jobs, mending fences or fixing machinery. What mattered most was not the weight of the bundle, but the weight of resilience carried within. To live without money meant learning to see abundance in places others might overlook the shade of a tree on a hot afternoon. The cool water of a stream, the laughter of companions by the fire. These were riches that could not be bought. Yet they nourished the spirit as surely as food nourishes the body. Music was a constant companion on the road. A battered guitar might be passed around, its strings plucked softly as voices joined together in harmony. Harmonicas were small and easy to carry, and their notes floated into the night air, weaving through the sounds of nature. Sometimes the songs were cheerful, lively tunes that lifted spirits. Other times they were slow, melancholy melodies that gave voice to longing. Music required no money, only breath, and it became a way for hobos to remind themselves of joy. To those who listened, it was comfort. To those who played, it was survival. A way to express emotions too heavy for words alone. And so the camps echoed with song, carrying both sorrow and hope into the night. In towns along the way, hobos became part of the landscape, though often on its edges. They were the figures resting under trees near the railroad tracks, or the silhouettes walking along dusty roads. Children sometimes watched them with wide eyes, curious about the strangers who seemed both mysterious and familiar. To some, they were symbols of hardship. To others, they were symbols of freedom. For though their lives were difficult, they carried a kind of independence that many quietly admired. They belonged not to one place, but to every place. And though they owned little, they owned the vastness of the road, the rail, and the open sky. There was a kind of dignity in their endurance, a quiet strength in their ability to survive without bitterness. They did not measure their days in dollars earned or possessions gained, but in miles travelled, meals shared, and friendships formed. Their wealth was in stories, the tales of towns visited, of kind hands extended, of nights under starlit skies. And as these stories were told and retold, they became part of the Hobo legacy, a history not written in books, but carried in memory, in song, in whispered words around campfires. Each tale was a reminder that survival itself was a triumph, that to keep walking, to keep singing, to keep hoping, was to resist the weight of despair. And so the Hobos wandered, not as beggars, not as outcasts, but as travellers on a path shaped by history. They survived without a single dollar, by drawing on the greatest resource of all, the human capacity for endurance, for kindness, and for imagination. Their story, though born of hardship, becomes tonight a story of peace, of the quiet beauty of simple living, of finding home in the rhythm of trains and the company of strangers. And as we drift deeper into their world, we can let their footsteps guide us, slow and steady, into the gentle embrace of dreams. As dawn broke after another night on the road, the Hobos often stirred slowly, stretching their tired limbs beneath the morning sky. The cool mist of early light clung to the fields, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and dew. For many mornings began not with the sound of an alarm, but with the gentle chorus of birds greeting the sun, rising from the ground, brushing dust from their jackets. They began another day's journey, guided not by clocks or calendars, but by the steady pull of the horizon. Life without money taught them to measure time differently, not in hours worked or wages earned, but in the natural rhythms of day and night, of distance walked, of seasons turning. Each sunrise was a new beginning, and each sunset a reminder that they had endured one more day. Along their journeys, Hobos often crossed paths with farmers working their land or shopkeepers sweeping dust from their storefronts. They learned that survival was not just about taking, but about offering something in return. A strong back could carry wood, mend fences, or harvest crops. A quick hand could sweep floors, paint walls, or help repair a wagon. In exchange for labour, a meal or a place to sleep might be offered. In this way, a hobo could earn not just bread for his body, but also respect for his efforts. These exchanges, though small, restored dignity, showing that even those without coins could contribute, could be part of the great wheel of life, turning slowly through hard times. Sometimes the road offered surprises. A stranger might hand over a fresh apple, its skin shining in the sun. A shopkeeper might slip a hunk of bread into roughened hands. A child, curious and unafraid, might wave to the wanderer passing by, a gesture of innocence that reminded the hobo of family far away. Each gift, however small, carried a weight far beyond its size. In a world where every bite mattered, a simple piece of fruit became a feast. A smile became a treasure. These moments were reminders that kindness was not lost, that humanity still glowed softly even in the dimmest hours of the Depression. Evenings brought another chance to gather. By riverbanks, near forests, or along hidden trails close to the tracks, hobos built small fires. Flames crackled gently, casting light on weary faces, painting them in shades of orange and gold. Around those fires stories flowed like streams. One man might tell of a town where work was plentiful. Another might share directions to a farmhouse known for its generosity. Some told tall tales, weaving humour and exaggeration into their words, making companions laugh until the night air felt lighter. Others shared songs, voices blending into harmonies that rose above the smoke and drifted toward the stars. These gatherings were more than a chance to eat or rest. They were a way to remind one another that they were not alone, that the road was shared, and that companionship was its own kind of shelter. The jungles, those camps at the edges of towns, grew into small societies. They were not lawless places, but communities bound by respect. Some men took it upon themselves to keep order, ensuring fires were tended safely, ensuring newcomers were welcomed fairly, ensuring that disputes did not grow into trouble. There was often an unspoken understanding that generosity should be matched by responsibility. If food was shared, dishes were washed. If a fire was built, wood was gathered by many, not few. In this way, even temporary settlements carried a sense of order, a fragile but real balance that made life easier for all. To wanderers who owned almost nothing, the jungle was a reminder that structure, however simple, gave comfort, that belonging, however brief, mattered deeply. Children of the Depression sometimes remembered hobos with a kind of wonder. For them, these figures were mysterious, arriving and disappearing like travellers from another world. They carried with them tales of distant cities, of rivers that gleamed under moonlight, of mountains rising sharp against the horizon. To young listeners, these stories were magic, transporting them beyond the limits of their towns. Though many parents warned against trusting strangers, some children grew up with warm memories of hobos who smiled kindly, who played a tune on a harmonica, who shared a gentle word before moving on. For the hobos, these small encounters were equally meaningful. Moments that reminded them of their own families, of brothers, sisters, children left behind in towns they may never see again. Living without money also meant learning to notice details that others overlooked. A patch of wild berries hidden at the edge of a field, a stream where fish moved lazily in the current, a hollow tree that could shield against rain. These small discoveries became lifelines. Hobos read the world the way others might read newspapers. The tilt of smoke rising in the distance told them where houses stood. The sound of dogs barking warned of unfriendly yards. The sight of laundry fluttering on a line told them which homes were lived in and loved. This way of seeing turned the landscape itself into a map, a guide not drawn on paper, but carried in the mind, rich with knowledge earned by walking, by watching, by listening. Though their journeys were often solitary, hobos were rarely truly alone. Each meeting along the tracks, each wave from a passing traveller, each story shared by firelight wove them into a vast, invisible web of companionship. They might part ways after a night or two, never to meet again, yet the bond of shared struggle lingered. It was as though the road itself remembered, carrying forward the warmth of one camp into the next, the song of one group into the ears of another. This quiet fellowship, fragile but enduring, was the heartbeat of hobo life. It reminded each traveller that survival was not merely about filling the belly, but about filling the spirit, and that companionship, however fleeting, gave strength to face another day. As the Great Depression stretched on, the hobos continued to wander, their lives weaving in and out of towns, rail yards, and open plains, each mile walked, each meal shared. Each night spent beneath the stars became part of their legacy. And though many of their names were never recorded, their footprints linger in history, a testament to the resilience of those who lived with nothing, yet carried everything they needed within themselves. Their story is not one of despair, but of quiet endurance, of learning to live with little, of finding beauty in simplicity, of holding on to dignity when the world seemed determined to take it away. Tonight, as you listen, you can almost hear the faint whistle of a train in the distance, the low hum of wheels turning on iron tracks, the soft voices of travellers gathered by a fire, sharing bread and stories. You can imagine the stars shining above them, just as stars shine above you now, steady, eternal, comforting. And as their footsteps echo softly in your mind, you can let yourself drift, as they once did, into the quiet rhythm of the road, into the gentle embrace of rest, into dreams that carry you forward, calm and unhurried, like the steady roll of a train through the night.